Episode 2 of Frozen Planet 2 is called Frozen Ocean, and this deals with the Arctic Ocean. So this episode opens up as you'd expect with polar bears. We start off with a mother and two cubs. That's fine, we don't go into too much detail there. We then follow a young female, which is much more interesting. We see her basically trying to find seals. Usually when you see a polar bear hunting seals, it's pretty unsuccessful. However, here you do see the aftermath of a kill. You don't actually see the kill itself, I think because people like seals. We don't really want to see polar bears kill them. We'd prefer to leave that bit out. But we do see the pretty gory aftermath. I'm not saying I need that in these kind of programs, but it's nice to show some variety, to show that the polar bears are actually capable of catching things. That's a nice thing to remember. And then we see this young female interacting with a young male. It's quite interesting because usually you'd think, okay, polar bears, they're not going to get on, but these two just seem to get on like a house on fire. They're playing about a bit. It's quite nice. I think maybe because they're so young, they're still in that kind of playful juvenile stage, and maybe later in life they probably won't be like that. But it's still really interesting to see because you don't see that very often. It's kind of hard to deny that they're playing when the female goes into the water and goes out the other side and then scares the male and he's going in after her. That's quite fun. It's just a nice fun sequence. This episode does range from being quite fun to being quite dark, and this is definitely one of the more fun sequences. And it's just a nice polar bear sequence. I think polar bears do lend themselves sometimes to kind of more light-hearted sequences. We do tend to focus on the doom and gloom of polar bears going extinct as a result of climate change. But no, it's nice to see something a bit different here, and it was quite nice. Then we move on to beluga whales. The beluga stuff is quite good. It's basically a pod of belugas getting trapped over the winter when the ice freezes over, and there's one gap left that they can actually breathe through. We did see this in Blue Planet when they were getting attacked by the polar bear. This is a bit different. In this sequence, they're not getting attacked by polar bears, but we do focus on the starvation element of it, so you do feel the stakes in this sequence. And then when the ice melts, the belugas are able to get out to the open water. They follow some narwhals. That's quite cool, watching them interact with the narwhals. We actually only briefly see them interact with them. It kind of makes out that they interact for quite a while, but there aren't actually any shots after the initial meet of them together, so that might have been some narrative trickery. But it was still a good sequence. Again, nice seeing belugas. We figured they'd be in this series, and it was nice seeing them here. And then we see harp seals, specifically harp seal pups. So this is just nice. Harp seal pups are probably one of the most adorable animals in nature. I think that's a pretty unanimous opinion. They look very cute. This sequence basically follows a pup getting suckled by its mum, and then it starts to slowly grow in independence, starts going at the water a bit more. Then as it develops the fat it needs to survive in the water, it's able to be there longer. The shots of the pup in the water are absolutely spectacular, especially the ones upside down. They look absolutely brilliant. This is a very, very well shot sequence, and it is really sad when the mother leaves and they say that he'll never see its pup again, and the pup's just sadly looking for its mum. Really sad stuff. And yeah, it's a really good sequence. It does kind of end quite sadly when they talk about how the ice is melting, and because the pups can't survive in the cold water when they're first born, they need this ice, so as it's melting, their chances of survival diminish. So that's quite a sobering thing to leave you with. We then focus on the algal bloom. The main thing we see here is the skeleton shrimp. We basically see a load of skeleton shrimp try to climb up a kelp to get to the nutrients that the algae provide, and it's fine. It's a nice funny sequence. We see one female blocking the way, and it basically creates a queue. It's alright. It's probably one of the least memorable sequences from the episode, but to be fair, it is something different. It's not an animal you ever see before, so I think that's pretty good. I like that sequence. Then we spend quite a bit of time with bowhead whales. I think bowhead whales are reasonably well known, but we don't really spend too much time with them. I think the only time I'd ever seen them before was them just, existing at the North Pole and talking about how they're the most northerly whales in the world. So it was good to see a bit more of them here. It was good to see them in the summer when they actually congregate in quite large numbers. There's like 50 of them, which is quite a lot for bowhead whales because there's not that many of them out there. And it was good hearing a lot of little facts about them, like how they have the widest mouth of any animal and how they're the longest lived mammals, some of them living up to 200 years old. I don't know how they quantify that, but I'll take their word for it. And then we watched them getting attacked by orcas. So this sequence was pretty good, pretty hard to watch, as orca hunts generally are. It's basically the same thing you've seen before, but with a different species of whale. We've got the orcas going after the whales, getting the young one, and then basically ramming it until they're able to drown it. I do remember that when this came out, I did feel a bit like, okay, I've seen this before, like I've seen orcas hunting whales. It's nothing really that new. This time around, I did appreciate it a bit more. I will say that obviously we've seen this kind of behaviour a lot before. However, this behaviour is a lot more common now because the ice is melting. So the orcas have greater access to the bowhead whales. Before, they wouldn't really be able to get them very often. And to be fair, orcas weren't that common in the Arctic until relatively recently. The chances are this behaviour would not have been anywhere near as common as it is now when the last Frozen Planet came out. So that's interesting to note. And then we see crested auklets. So this is interesting because we obviously know seabirds are a big part of the Arctic ecosystem, but we've never really seen these ones before. So this was really good. Again, they look pretty funny. They've got a kind of Elvis quiff going on, and it's a good sequence. We basically see a male try to attract females. He doesn't stand out as much as the other males. Then this Arctic fox scares everyone away, so he's able to take the prime spot and get all the females. What I liked about this sequence, apart from the fact that it was quite amusing, I mean, they looked pretty silly, was that they did highlight how the male obviously has to attract the female, but when he's got his pick of the females, he becomes a lot more selective, because obviously they're not like mammals, he's only going to mate with one female, so it would make sense that the males are also picky. I think that's a common misconception in nature, that only one sex is selective, usually females. I think humans are probably the most prime example of an animal where both sexes are pretty selective, so of course it makes sense that other animals like that, so I like how they did actually kind of debunk that myth in a way. And then we see walruses, another fun sequence. This was basically walruses clambering out at the beach. They're all packed in together, they're all farting and annoying each other, and then when they want to get back to the water to stop overheating, they basically just roll down the sand. It's pretty funny. I think sequences regarding walruses tend to be either really funny or really sad. Thankfully, this was a really funny sequence. And again, it was fun. It was a nice bit of fun. I like the walruses. They're always pretty cool. They're iconic Arctic animals. So I'm glad we got them here, and I'm glad they were doing something fun and not getting, killed horrifically. Then the last major bit of footage focuses on polar bears again. Again, we start with polar bears, we end with them. We basically see them on this massive island. I think it's called Rancor Island. It's where there's the highest densities of polar bears anywhere in the world. It's this one island in the middle of nowhere, and all these polar bears congregate there because obviously they're swimming thousands of miles, and they all kind of end up there. And we watch them kind of clambering for food. There's this one female and two cubs looking for food on this island. It's pretty risky because there's loads of males there. The males are able to get walruses, but the female doesn't want to risk her cubs. But I guess at the point where they're starving that she really has to. And the risk she's taking to dive in amongst all these males to get food. But the males are hanging around her cubs, and the males will take her cubs. So she's having to dart back and forth between the kill and her cubs to kind of protect them. It's a really good sequence. The music's really epic as well. Almost more epic than I think the behaviour actually was. I think we basically follow her chasing this one really, really big male off. And while he looks really intimidating, he was covered in blood, which also added to the intimidation aspect. I think the fact that he was covered in blood would indicate that he's probably pretty well fed in this particular scenario, so she probably didn't need to be as protective in that particular situation, but it was a really good sequence. As I say, the music was epic, and it really made you really care about the mother and the cubs, so I think that was a really good sequence. And while it didn't really, hammer home the climate change stuff, it did talk about how these polar bears are really struggling, and they're all ended up on this island because obviously the ice is melting, and they can't hunt seals in the same way they would before. And this is only going to become more prominent. Then we had the diaries, and it was about the people filming the harp seals. This was a good sequence, and I think it was actually interesting, and it did seem like it was a massive pain in the arse to film. Like, the ice kept closing them in, they had to keep scraping ice off the boat. Even the guys in the water were in the water for so long, waiting on the pups getting in, and they were really risking getting hypothermia. But then it all pays off when the pup does go in the water, and the guys getting the really amazing shots of them underwater, and it really is good. You can see the guys just loving it. I mean, I imagine you would in that particular scenario. I think it would be pretty cool having a harp seal pup just playing around in the water in front of you. But it does have quite a somber ending when you watch the storm come in. And I was kind of thinking, so obviously they need to get there, but what about the harp seals? And the captain basically says, yeah, the harp seal pups will probably wash into the water. And you do see that the mum's really struggling, and the pup is getting closer and closer to the water. You don't see the pup actually go in, but it kind of makes it pretty clear that pup did not survive things, which is really heartbreaking because that's the pup you follow in the episode. And while that sequence kind of ended on a more somber note, it is pretty bleak to know that it didn't actually make it pretty much after they were filming it. Not really a cheery way of ending things. But no, this episode is pretty good. Again, it's another really good episode. I really liked it. Obviously, in Frozen Planet, they had a lot more room to play with things. Like, you basically had every episode dealt with the Arctic and the Antarctic. They could spend a lot more time highlighting different animals in each episode. But this one has to be a bit more targeted. So I think the animals they chose to focus on were very good. They got all the kind of heavy hitters in, I think. The polar bears, the belugas, the walruses, all that stuff was in there. And I think it was pretty good. It's a pretty good episode. Yeah, so the highlights for me were probably the polar bears at the end, I think. I like the harp seals, I like the bow-eyed whales. I pretty much liked everything in here, to be honest with you. It was all pretty good. So yeah, what were your highlights? Let me know in the comments below. And as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. I'll be doing the next one next week, which is all about the mountains, so a bit different. And I'll see you then, and goodbye.